Hey everyone, welcome. If you're a focused learner gearing up for the Certified Surgical Technologist exam, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're building a highly structured, strategic framework for mastering anatomy and physiology on the CST exam. Look, we aren't just going to sit here and read a textbook. We are organizing the absolute highest yield anatomy facts into a streamlined visual review, all so you can walk into test day with total confidence. Let's get started. So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by decoding the CST exam, then move into high-yield body systems, positioning risks, critical OR physiology. And finally, we'll wrap up with some essential exam mnemonics.
All right, part 1, decoding the CST exam, strategy over memorization. If there's literally only one thing you take away from today, let it be this. Rote memorization of anatomy is going to fail you on test day. But strategic application, that wins every single time.
Now you might be wondering, how does A&P actually show up on the test? Because honestly, it's almost never tested in isolation. You're not going to get a blank diagram with an arrow pointing to a random bone. Instead, the anatomy is embedded directly into surgical scenarios. You have to really understand the anatomy to make sense of the scenario itself.
The CST exam actually weaves anatomy into questions in 5 really distinct ways. You're going to see structures at risk during surgical procedures, nerve risks tied to patient positioning, and instrumentation. And for that one, knowing exactly why a specific structure is being retracted is just as crucial as knowing where it is. Finally, they'll test your pathology identification and postoperative complications tied directly back to anatomical injuries. Okay, moving on to Section 2, High-Yield Body Systems, from anatomy to the OR table. We're shifting our focus to the heavy-hitting body systems now, and we'll connect those foundational organs directly to the surgical procedures you are practically guaranteed to see on the test. When you're reviewing accessory digestive organs, you've got to focus right in on the surgical relevance. Take the pancreas, for example. You must associate it with the Whipple procedure, also known as a pancreaticoduodenectomy, which is used for tumors in the head of the pancreas. And for the gallbladder, you absolutely 100% need to know Cowlett's triangle. That's the cystic artery, the cystic duct, and the common hepatic duct, which all must be identified during a cholecystectomy. Seriously, these are guaranteed exam points right here.
Now, looking at the endocrine system, this perfectly highlights the immediate systemic consequences of surgery. Think about the parathyroid glands. They regulate calcium. If a surgeon inadvertently removes them during a thyroidectomy, it triggers a massive physiological crisis. We're talking hypocalcemia leading straight to muscle tetany. The test absolutely loves to ask about the physiological fallout of anatomical mistakes.
Let's think about the most common major surgery in the entire world, the cesarean section. The surgeon cuts from the outside in, right? They go through the skin via a fan and steel incision, then subcutaneous fat, fascia, rectus abdominis muscles, peritoneum, and finally the uterus. So why does mapping this out matter? Because every single abdominal case closes in the exact reverse order. Knowing these specific layers dictates exactly what you are tracking during your sponge and instrument counts.
Contrasting the right and left bronchus brilliantly illustrates a really critical anatomical rule. The right bronchus is shorter, wider, and much more vertical than the left. Because of this exact geometry, if a patient aspirates a foreign body, or, hey, if the endotracheal tube is pushed just a bit too far down during intubation, it almost always ends up on the right side.
R3 already, positioning and nerve risks. The physical risks of the OR. We're moving from internal organs to the external, physical threats of the operating room table. Patient positioning is incredibly high yield for this exam. Different physical positions bring very specific nerve and anatomical risks. In the supine position, for instance, if you abduct the arms past 90 degrees, you're directly threatening the brachial plexus. Or take the prone position. Direct pressure there is a massive threat to the eyes, running the risk of corneal abrasions or even retinal ischemia. You have to be able to anticipate these risks before the patient even rolls into the room. Listen closely here, because this is the ultimate threat. The single most common positioning nerve injury in the entire operating room involves the common peroneal nerve, which sits right at the fibular head. When a patient is placed in the lithotomy position, if this specific area isn't padded perfectly against the stirrups, the nerve gets compressed. And the result? Foot drop. The patient completely loses the ability to dorsiflex their foot. I'm telling you, this is the most tested positioning injury out there. Do not forget it. All right, Section 4, Critical OR Physiology,
internal balance, and bleeding. We're going to transition smoothly into the invisible physiological battles happening during surgery, specifically looking at bleeding and shock.
The test is absolutely, without a doubt, going to expect you to know your coagulation pathways. PT and INR measure the extrinsic pathway, which is exactly what we check to see the effect of warfarin. On the flip side, PTT or APTT measures the intrinsic pathway, and that's specifically used to monitor heparin. Make sure you cement the difference between these two pathways in your brain right now.
Now, different surgical crises trigger very specific types of shock. It's a domino effect. If the surgeon accidentally hits a major vessel, the patient loses blood volume, right? That triggers hypovolemic shock. But say the patient has a massive allergic reaction to a med, their vessels dilate, causing distributive shock. Understanding the root mechanism is key because it tells you exactly what treatment the anesthesia team is going to ask you for next.
0.9%. That number represents 0.9% normal saline. And why does this single specific detail matter so much? Because it is literally the only intravenous fluid that is compatible with blood transfusions, period. If you try running packed red blood cells with lactated ringers, it causes the blood to clot right in the line. If you use D5W, it causes the red blood cells to hemolyze, meaning they burst open. It has to be 0.9% normal saline, no exceptions.
Okay, home stretch, Section 5, Essential Exam Mnemonics, Rapid Fire Memory Hacks. We are going to lock in those really tough memorization points using some essential rapid-fire exam mnemonics. Think of these as your digital flashcards.
Try pulling my aorta. Honestly, I love this one. It's so simple, and it perfectly breaks down the exact sequence of blood flow through the heart valves. Tricuspid, pulmonic, mitral, aortic. Any single time you get a question about the sequence of chambers and valves during a cardiac case, just jot down, try pulling my aorta on your scratch paper, and you'll instantly solve it.
Next up, water under the bridge. Guys, this simple phrase will absolutely save you on GYN surgery questions. During a hysterectomy, the water, which represents the ureters carrying urine, passes directly under the bridge, which is the uterine artery. Because they cross paths so incredibly closely, the ureters are the single most common site of injury during pelvic surgery. Just remember, water under the bridge.
Okay, next is navel. N-A-V-E-L. This maps out the anatomy of the femoral triangle directly from lateral to medial. Nerve, artery, vein, empty space, and lymphatics. If you're setting up for an inguinal hernia repair or a groin dissection, you have to know exactly where the surgeon is navigating, and navel gives you that perfect lateral to medial roadmap.
Now let's compare two massive physiological warning signs side by side, these crucial triads. Cushing's triad, which is high blood pressure, low heart rate, and irregular respirations, is a giant flashing red flag for increased intracranial pressure and impending brain herniation. On the other hand, Beck's triad, low blood pressure, jugular vein distension, and muffled heart sounds, means the patient is in cardiac tamponade, literally meaning the heart is being crushed by fluid. You've got to know the difference between these two.
All right, to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this final provocative exam scenario. Imagine a patient develops hoarseness postoperatively after a neck dissection. Which nerve was injured? Think back to our endocrine table from earlier. Give up? It's the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Let that connection linger for a second. Do you see how the anatomy directly explains the surgical complication? That, right there, is exactly how you hack this exam. Keep studying with that strategic mindset. Trust your preparation, and I'll see you in the next explainer.